This content is for kids.
It's not for kids.
Isn't that what I said?
No, it's not for kids. If you are 13 years or younger, this is not for you. Do I have to kill somebody in order to actually make that point across?
No, man, you don't have to kill
Wait
no
a
one.
second.
No.
When we return to our planet, the High Court may well sentence you to torture.
He likes movies, we like movies. Septum Sin versus the world. 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 I'd buy that for $1.
Greetings! You're watching Septum Sin vs. the World. I'm Septum Sin. We're actually doing an episode of Video Game Diaries, and I've been kind of reviving this series. We're getting close to our 4-year anniversary, God forbid. And one of the projects I had actually started Video Game Diaries with was completing 2 series of games that I really, as an RPG lover, should have been up to date with. Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior, or Dragon Quest, depending on how you look at it. So, just as an update, prior to starting this quest, I had beaten Dragon Quest 1, 3, 7. Just those 3. And I had beaten Final Fantasy 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. But there's a lot more Final Fantasies than there are Dragon Quest games, so it kind of evens out. So I started my quest trying to take on the Terrible Twos, and I defeated Dragon Quest, and I talk about it elsewhere. I don't think I did an entire video for it, but I'm not going to go back to that. And then I went ahead and updated my what do they call it? My stuff to go ahead and tackle one of the more dreaded items on my list, Final Fantasy II. Now, I originally got this right here. When this came out for the PlayStation, it was huge. I never liked playing emulated stuff on a computer. I've never been into it. And when Final Fantasy Origins came out, they updated graphics, and it came with 2 games, and one of them I was super psyched to get into, which was Final Fantasy II. Because I had played the original Final Fantasy on the NES when it released. I loved it. And, you know, same thing with Final Fantasy II. I mean, look at that artwork. The Unlimited Saga advert. It's kind of close to the end of the PlayStation's life cycle, but I love that they did this. And Final Fantasy on this, I love the updated graphics. I mean, it's kind of like it's 16-bit type graphics, but it's still there, and it's still 2 Final Fantasy games on it. But then I got to Final Fantasy II and started playing it, and oh my God, it was terrible. Now, that was when this came out. Now, let's see here. I believe this was around 2003 that this came out. So I started trying around the time it came out in 2003. And that's been, so 21, 20, 19, 18, so around 18 years? 17, 18 years? I'm finally getting to complete it. Essentially, I tried multiple times, and then eventually I got the PSP. I got this downloaded on that to try and just keep working at it. And I finally pushed and pushed and pushed. Got a guide, said, you know what, I'm not having any fun with this game whatsoever. I'm just going to get a guide. I'm going to just through. So I did, and I beat this game. I cannot tell you what a big accomplishment this is for me. I think this is probably the biggest hurdle. Every other game has at least some reasonable quality to it. Maybe 13 will drag, but we'll see how it goes. But and I'm working on Final Fantasy 3 right now, which is reasonably good so far. Now let's talk about the good things of this particular. Graphically, it's a great update. Again, 16-bit update, kind of goes along the same lines. If you played Final Fantasy IV of the original, it's in that level of graphics, and the music's actually not terrible. I really like the music. I like the overworld music. It introduced the Chocobo music. It's kind of bare bones, but it's still the Chocobo music we have come to love, and that's just awesome. It's expanded on the world. It was a bit of an open world game. You could go anywhere and kind of try and do things and explore if you really wanted to. And it had a story. It was the first Final Fantasy that had like a legit story with characters that had somewhat personalities. But that's the end of what I've got to say on the good. Bad encounter rate. Terrible. And to that, the encounters are cheapened by the fact that your characters level up in a probably the worst system I have ever seen in a Final Fantasy game. This game has you leveling up in percentages. So you swing an axe, you get a certain percentage in axes. You cast a spell, you get a certain percentage in spells. That's not so bad, right? Well, in theory. But instead, you end up, if you try and just do it through battles, it's not going to progress well. It's going to progress too slow. So there's a cheat you can do if you spend like maybe a day's worth of grinding, just basically taking a battle, selecting attack, second character, attack, third character, attack, back. And you do it when you get a fourth character. And all the fourth characters are just these story characters. They're usually pretty weak compared to the party if you do what I did. And until you get to the right level. Also, same thing with spells. And what I did is I had a spellcaster, just one resident spellcaster. And you can't attack too much with the spellcaster because if you attack physically, then your intelligence goes down. You also have to near drain your MP to 0 in a battle before you start gaining MP, and that's not so bad. But the harder part is getting your HP up. You got to basically end up hitting each other because you got to take damage, and you can't heal that damage by the end of the battle. So you push it too far, and you end up, well, dying, and then you gain nothing. So it's a very delicate balance. But let's just say that I gained most of my stuff at the very beginning of the game and did very little grinding after that. Most of the spells you find at the beginning of the game, I also found were just as effective and sometimes even more effective than the spells later. Ultima, which is introduced later in the game, is less powerful than Fire 3, or Fire, really, or some of the basic elemental spells, or even Flare, which I leveled those up to maximum just to say, okay, let's see. And no, it was actually less powerful. This game makes me roll my eyes. So you've got a lot of encounters that amount to next to nothing when it comes to progression. You got most of the spells that you're going to use towards the end of the game. And the money, you don't really have to grind for money. So this is tedious. And then you've got dungeon design. Dungeons are designed to get you lost. And instead of the normal, where you've got branching paths and they lead to treasure chests, some branching paths lead to treasure chests, and others lead to these blank, empty rooms, and they throw you in the center of the room. So that you have got to go through at least one encounter. Because Lord knows there are not enough encounters in this game. And a lot of the story is also confusing. I needed a guide to keep up with each of the story beats. They have a weird password system, and I think that if they... And again, a lot of this stuff shows potential, but it's just screwed it up. So you have this password system. If you don't talk to the right person, memorize the right words, say the right word to the right person at the right time, go to the right place in the world, you are screwed. This was one of my biggest gripes with Final Fantasy V, was you got lost and you couldn't figure out where to go some of the time. Here it's a lot worse. They did much better in 5 than they did in this. And even the character design is not as up to par as it should. If you must play this, don't play this version. And definitely stay away from the NES version. This one has a lot of the same pitfalls of the NES versions, just graphically up-resed. But I've heard that the original PSP version is pretty good. The graphics are even sharper, and they improved upon a lot of the quality of life. So that you could actually go through the game, if you're fighting everything and you're sticking to the same weapon and spells that you're using throughout, you'll level up at a rate that will allow you to not have to grind necessarily. So, with that being said, I would still stay away from this game. It's boring, it's long, and I'm just hard-headed for completing it. But, who knows? Maybe in our next Video Game Diaries, no, it's not going to be the next. When I finish Final Fantasy III, and then I will probably think a little bit better. I'm debating about this. I'm thinking what I'm probably going to do is I'll finish Final Fantasy III, then take a break from Final Fantasy for a while, hit Dragon Quest 4, 5, and 6. Then go back and hit the Final Fantasy IV so I can hit that After Years, because I never finished that. Then probably go back and hit Dragon Quest 8 and maybe even 9. Well, I'm debating whether I'll do that. I might just hit Dragon Quest 8 or even skip all the way over to Final Fantasy 12, which might be there. That'll be, but no, I think probably I'll go with the rest of the Dragon Quests all the way through 9, and then I'll come back, because after I get through to that point, then I'll finally get off of the handhelds and be moving to the main consoles with Final Fantasy 12, 13, and 15. I'm not counting the online ones. To me, they're not really beatable. Online games are meant to be played forever. They're not real Final Fantasies as far as I'm concerned. And Dragon Quest 11. So it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a really enjoyable trip. And I hope you will eventually join me as I come back and I talk about my experiences. But with luck, I will finally have accomplished this. So I've finally beaten the Terrible 2s, and we'll see how things go from there. Well, this is Septum Sen, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.